Good morning, everyone. I'm not a morning person, so I'm fascinated that this many people actually get up and come to an event and have been coming to these events. So that's awesome. And I apologize, I say awesome a lot, even before getting involved with Awesome Pittsburgh. So, it would make for a great drinking game, but probably not at 9 in the morning. So I want to thank, first of all, I want to thank Kate and the whole Creative Mornings team for inviting me to speak. I kind of want to maybe sarcastically thank Kate for having me follow Mr. McFeely, who got to talk about happiness, where I get up and talk about money. It reminded me of, I always wondered who followed the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, and it turns out it was a guy named Fred Capps, and I go by Mike Capps on Twitter, so now Fred and I are brothers in spirit. And I would say Mr. Rogers is bigger than the Beatles, so I will say that. So I want to talk about money, and I want to talk about ideas. I've upgraded the idea symbol from a incandescent bulb to a more cost-efficient and longer-lasting idea representation. Ideas are great, right? You all have them. We all have them. We get them in the shower. We get them while we're sitting in traffic. Sometimes they stick in our heads for a while, and we say, how can I make this happen? Or maybe you just think, wouldn't it be great if? And it oftentimes doesn't amount to anything. And I'm fascinated by that. I have these ideas all the time. You can ask me about my sandwich caddy idea sometime, which I've had in my head for 15 years. And it's a silly idea, but it's an idea that for some reason I haven't let go of. And I think that happens a lot, where people think about these things they could do or somebody should do, and they never get anywhere. And thinking about why that is, a lot of times it's money, a lot of times it's the energy involved in getting there, figuring out how to get there. And I think, and a lot of times it's just having sort of a little push. I was trying to figure out how to sort of frame this. And I wonder if you think back to 1980, somebody may have done us some harm by suggesting to, as part of his Jedi training, sorry, I work at Google. I have to make a Star Wars reference. Yoda, I think you may know this quote. Yoda says, "Do or do not."
There is no try.
Right, there is no try. That's terrible advice, right? That's great advice if you're about to fight Darth Vader and you shouldn't be experimenting with new moves when you're about to take on the Empire. You may lose a hand. But I think for us in everyday life, it's terrible advice. There's lots of try. There should be more try. And I think we're living in a world now where that's becoming easier and easier to do. There's more ways to do it. It's cheaper to try things than it ever has before. There's 3D printers now that allow you to make something out of plastic in your home, where you used to have to send specs to a factory for them to manufacture things for you, with high-end equipment. So everything's becoming cheaper to try and easier to try. And the social networks make it easier to find people who want to help you. But money seems to be that one last thing that's getting in our way. This is Tim Hwang. He was a guy up at MIT in Boston. He had this idea. He was frustrated with seeing his friends who had great ideas like this, who wanted to try them, saying, okay, I just need a little money to get started. And they would go looking for grants. And what they were finding was there's a lot of foundations, a lot of organizations that fund great ideas, but oftentimes they fund $100,000 ideas or $10,000 ideas, and you have to fit their criteria, and you probably have to fill out some paperwork. And I want to say these foundations aren't bad. They're the sort of lifeblood of so much of what we have in our world, in our society. Nonprofits rely on foundations, and they're extremely important, but they're hard to tap into if you just have an idea you want to try. So Tim got a bunch of his friends together and said, let's let's pool our money, just a little bit of money, and give it to people we think have awesome ideas. And they said, yeah, that's great. It was a bunch of guys like in the software world who said, we want to fund some of our friends' ideas. They called it the Awesome Foundation. I think the official name was the Awesome Foundation for Arts and Sciences. And they put out a call for proposals, and they got a lot of IT and tech proposals because everybody knew them as the tech guys. But they also had this one architect. And this architect, her name was, blanking now, Hansi Barraza, I think, said, you know what we need? We need a giant communal hammock. That's what we need. And that was the first project that was funded by the Awesome Foundation in Boston. She created it, she manufactured it, put it up in Boston Common. She had to deal with all kinds of political barriers and all these other things, like apparently you can't just put a hammock up in a public park and not have city officials asking you about it. But it ended up being pretty successful, and it happened. It's a portable hammock. She can actually put it in other places too. It got a ton of press, and it also exposed a lot of the people to this idea that a small amount of money can be extremely impactful. When we started Awesome Pittsburgh, I used this a lot to sort of get a feel for if a trustee would sort of get what we're trying to do. So I would say, let me tell you about this project we did in Boston. And if someone said, that's incredible, that's so cool, how do I be part of that? That was a good sign. If they said, who needs a stupid giant hammock? How does that help anyone? I knew that they weren't the right fit. So we decided, Matt Gaston, who was the co-founder with me, heard about what was going on in Boston and said, do you want to start this? I think we met at OTB in the South Side, a great bar, and he sort of pitched it to me. And my first reaction was, $100, and it's $100 a month for everybody to participate. That's a lot of money. That's like the expression "give till it hurts." That kind of hurt when he first brought it up. And then I thought, but the great thing about it is, we probably all give donations to different charities and nonprofits, and that always feels good to do, and you always feel like you're helping out. But you often don't get a sense for where that money is going, or even if you know where it's going, you don't get that immediate sort of feeling of I helped make this thing happen. And so that was sort of the more I thought about it, the more I thought this would be like the best $100 I would spend every month. The other thing for me that I realized was, I look at my LinkedIn profile and look at my connections and be so proud of what a high number of connections I had on LinkedIn. And then I realized they're all in the tech industry. I go to tech events and I recognize everybody. I went to the Pittsburgh Community Reinvestment Group Summit because I'm working with Uptown Partners, and I realized I didn't know a single person in this room of like 700 people, and I realized I was really in a bubble, that like I really wasn't engaged with the city the way I thought I was, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to do that, to really sort of connect a bunch of networks. We decided we wanted to gather, instead of doing what other chapters had done and get a group of our friends from the tech industry, and we could have, right? We could have just sent an email around to our coworkers saying, hey, who wants to do this? And I think we would have got 40 replies of interest. We specifically didn't invite anybody from the tech industry, and a lot of our friends are still pissed at us about that. But we tried to reach out to a different group of people. We tried to reach out to the nonprofit community, the art community, the education communities, and get a more well-rounded group of trustees. And that was how we got started. So that's our original group there. And you may know some of them. There's Leah Lizarrando is a pretty successful, I think she calls herself a veg hacker. But she's a food blogger. She blogs for Pittsburgh Magazine. She's also, she has like 4 other projects going on. And Jed Feldman is the sort of unofficial deputy mayor of Braddock. He's always, if you ever see John Fetterman's picture in the news, there's always this shadowy, blurry figure in the background, lurking in the shadow. That's Jed. He also runs an art gallery in Braddock. So we were really trying to round out the group. And it was great. Like, we really... really enjoyed, and still enjoy getting together and getting going. So I want to talk about some of the projects so you can get a sense. Well, let me explain exactly what the model is. I think there's 13 trustees now, and the original model was 10 trustees who all put in $100, and then we vote on proposals that people submit, and we give $1,000 to the one we think is the most awesome. The great thing about being the most awesome is there's really no way to define that. It's also the worst thing about the word awesome is there's no way to define it. But we wanted to, we try to go for breadth, so we never actually really define awesome very well. And if you look at the proposals we get, you can see that we haven't defined awesome because we get such a breadth of ideas. Everything from art and tech and food-related things and community development-related projects, business ideas, nonprofit ideas. It's been extremely cool. So basically, we vote every month. We have added trustees. There was an awesome summit in Boston last summer, and we got to meet people who are doing similar things in other cities around the world, and who were mimicking that original Awesome Foundation model of 10 trustees. And I said, how do you guys deal with wanting to add new members? We have 10, and we have so many good proposals. We wish we had 10 more, but we're having a hard time getting to a whole second group of 10. And they're like, we have 14, or we have 7, or we have 35. Awesome Halifax has 35 trustees. And we realized that there's the rules that Tim set out at the very beginning aren't rules at all, and everybody sort of hacked the model to their own liking. So we're up to 13 trustees now, and we've had a couple people leave and new people join, and like I said, it's been a lot of fun. So every month we review these proposals. I think on average we have more, 50% more proposals than any other city in the world who's doing the same thing. More than Boston, more than New York, more than San Francisco. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, number one, Pittsburgh's small enough that you know about us, that you know that there's this organization that can help get money into your hands to try things. But it's also big enough that there's a breadth of ideas and people and proposals out there to keep it going. So we get calls like, how are you getting so many proposals? And we just, Twitter and Facebook, I guess. But I think it's also word of mouth. I think it's events like this. It's events, all the different events going on in the city where we're able to spread the word about these things. So that's exciting too. It makes it even harder, obviously, because for every $1,000 that we give out, we're saying no to 30 or 40 other proposals, and they're great proposals. Like, I actually know some of the people in this room have sent proposals that we didn't fund, and every time I see you guys at parties, I feel super guilty. Like, hey guys, sorry. Which is a terrible feeling, right? Like, we talk about this all the time. Like, how can we do more for the great ideas that we don't fund? And a lot of what we try to do is just tell people about them. We try to talk about them, through social media or at events like this. We have parties every quarter where we highlight our grant winners. But like at the last one, we had four of the people that didn't win get up on stage and talk about their projects, and then we did a mini micro grant, I guess, to fund them. So we're trying to find ways to do more with this awesome group of proposals that we get every month. All right, the puppet photo booth was the first one we did. And just, when we were at this Awesome Summit, we met the guys who started Awesome Foundation in Boston. And we said, what's the biggest challenge for you guys? And they said, the biggest challenge we have is we can't decide whether to fund orphans or flamethrowers. Every month, it comes down to orphans versus flamethrowers. In other words, we get a lot of things for social good, and then we get things where it's like setting things on fire, right? Or it's... San Francisco did one where they filled a room full of balloons and had a dance party in it, right? Like, that's not really helping any underserved communities. It's just pretty cool to walk into a room that's filled floor to ceiling with balloons. So those are the types of things like we struggle with, and I think in Pittsburgh we probably lean a lot more towards the orphan side of the spectrum, the social good proposals. But we do try to balance it out some, and I actually always feel bad when we've done a couple in a row and we say, okay, we're not helping anybody this month. That's our goal. So the puppet photo booth was the first one we did. This was Murphy was a Master of Fine Arts student at Carnegie Mellon. She said she likes puppets, and she likes the idea of a photo booth that surprises people. This was her pitch in the proposal. Setting up a photo booth in the middle of Market Square seeing if people will come over, get into the photo booth. You guys know the photo booth where you put in the $1, or it's probably like $3 now, and takes a strip of pictures of you. She wanted to have something like that, except when you walk in and sit down, there's a live in-person puppet show that you see, which ends with getting your picture taken. Kind of a weird idea, but we liked the idea of just like surprising people in Market Square. We did 2 proposals that month, and the other one was a business idea, so we thought that was a nice mix to get started. And she built this. I mean, this is actually a picture of the finished product. She couldn't actually do it in Market Square because, again, you can't just set up things in Market Square. The city will actually stop by and yell at you. They were worried about scratching the pavement, I guess, was the reason she got. But she's been able to open it. She was at several art shows. There was actually a puppet festival that she was able to show it at. So she's had this around. She had it at one of our parties. I got to experience it. If you ever see it, go in. It's free. Go in and enjoy the show, and you'll get your picture taken. And I won't tell you what happens in there because that's part of the fun. So, from there, and a lot of times, so this was something that she'd been thinking about for a while, this like weird idea that was stuck in her head. Like, what if you took something that people think is one thing and totally shocked them when they engage with it? And that's sort of what was interesting to us. This next one was a guy who said, and I can talk about this in the first person. Like, computer programming is still today. It's everywhere. It's easier to get into. But it's still sort of sold to as something that there's no better way to say it. It's something that geeks do, right? It's not something that the cool kids in school do, or the whatever. It's still like very divided. It doesn't have that appeal to everybody. And Nate Good, who works for ShowClicks, wanted to fix that. He wanted people to see like it is for everybody, and it can be fun. And it's not about math. I mean, it is totally about math. But it's not about learning all the math first, learning all the languages first, and then when you're done, you get to do your first Hello World app. He wanted to teach kids who weren't being exposed to the ideas of computer programming or computer science, that it's basically you instructing the machine to do your bidding, right? It's you getting a machine to do what you want it to do. And it's not that hard to get into, despite what companies like Google would maybe have you think. So he actually used the money to buy these. Anybody know what that is? Yeah, Raspberry Pi. It's like I think a $35 computer that has pretty much all the equipment you need to program. Obviously, you have to hook it up to a monitor. But he ordered like a whole stack of these, and now he's going to have a class. He's targeting middle school kids in urban communities who don't have computer science programs at school, and he's going to teach them like how fun this is and how this isn't just for the smart kids. Going a totally different way, now back towards the flamethrower side, so I have to tell you a little story. In our first meeting, we had a proposal from a great organization that had this idea of they want to sail up and down the rivers and clean up the riverbanks, kind of like you do an Adopt a Highway program and you clean up the litter on the roads. They wanted to do this on the rivers. Which we thought was a great idea. But they wanted to use the money, so whenever you fill out an application, you say, here's who I am, here's what my proposal is, and here's how we'll use the money. They wanted to use the money to register to get their nonprofit status. We read the whole thing, we're like, yeah, aw, like, that's the least awesome part of your whole story, right? Like, we don't want to be the least awesome part. So we didn't vote for it. A few people voted for it just because the mission was cool. But we kind of wanted to like set the standard that we want to fund the crazy stuff. Even if like a big business came to us and they don't need our money, if they had a really crazy idea that they wouldn't do otherwise, and this $1,000 is the difference between them doing it or not, that we would seriously consider that. So we said, what advice would we give this group to tell them like what could they have submitted that would have made us vote for it? And someone said, well, what if they constructed this really unique, river-faring vessel that people would see, like this boat going up and down the rivers collecting garbage, and people would be like, oh, what's that? That's cool. And someone in our group just went, the garbarge. And everybody was like, unanimous. It would have won. So there's a freebie if you want to build that. The next month we got a proposal called the Art Barge, which I don't think was a coincidence. I think somebody must have coached, because that's too crazy. But it's a floating art venue for the rivers. They said we want to build, as a group of students at Carnegie Mellon, they wanted to build these hexagonal floating stage segments that could be tied together and could be used for music performances or performance art or whatever, and go up and down the river with it. I think they've done this like 6 or 7 times already. Different things have been on. They renamed it the Drift. I still like Art Barge better. Pretty much like anything with barge in it now. I think that's. But the Drift's pretty cool too. And the great thing about this project was the $1,000 helped them build the first segment, the first 6-sided raft that was used. They then got a Sprout Fund grant to take this further, and now they are able to give grants to artists who want to use that stage on the rivers. So they're sort of turned it around into a mini grant program to get art onto the rivers. So like that's what we love, is where, like, you ask what can $1,000 do, and $1,000 can get you pretty far. More than anything, get you to try things, and oftentimes somebody else will come along and turn that into the next big win. Okay, so back to kids. Teacher at Dixon Elementary in Swissvale, I think, had this idea. There was a plot of land behind the elementary school that wasn't being used. It was just sort of a grassy area with maybe some junk in it. She said, let's make that an outdoor classroom. She wanted the kids to decorate it, to actually build the classroom and then use it for classes outdoors. So that's Beth Wagner, and she created this outdoor art garden. You can see like a lot of people came out to help. They used the money, I think, just to buy a few picnic tables and some paint. But they had a bunch of people from the community and kids come out and create this outdoor classroom that can be used by anybody at the school. I think she's probably the main user of it. But very cool. Like $1,000 can get you pretty far there. She was able to build a new facility for teaching. And then this last one you may have read about or seen on the news. It's been getting a lot of press. This is definitely in the flamethrower category. It's the zip line from Mount Washington down to the North Shore. It's going to be a half-mile zip line ride. The Adam Young was the guy who put in this proposal. He actually won in September, and we just announced it because we wanted to make sure that he was getting. If you can't put a puppet photo booth in Market Square because it might scratch the pavement, how do you put a zip line across the river, right across the Ohio River? So we wanted to make sure that he had community support. He wanted to make sure he had people on both ends of the zip line willing to let him build there. And he did get all those. He talked to the Army Corps of Engineers to make sure he could build over the river, because apparently the Ohio River is Maritime Highway 70, which is crazy, and has all kinds of rules, just like roads do. So there's a lot, and he has a long way to go, and obviously $1,000 doesn't pay for a half-mile zip line across the river. This is one where, like I said earlier, we didn't want to fund the nonprofit status. Here we ended up funding a risk assessment study, but a zip line across the rivers is just too awesome. Like, if he said this is going to fund, the press release, we would have funded it. So, our first meeting, we said, where are the zip line proposals? And when this one came out, none of us believed this was real. We actually contacted him to make sure this was a real proposal. And then he pulled out a binder, and we're like, oh my, yeah, okay, yeah. So we're in. So definitely write to your local elected officials, because so far the Mount Washington community has been very receptive. The Carnegie Science Center offered to be to let them put the other end of it there. He's been getting good support from everybody, but every one of the stories, if you read all the way through at the end, there's some council person who says, yeah, it's a great idea, but it's going to be really hard to overcome some of the policy problems and stuff. So, we're not going to let them spoil it. Okay, so this comes down. Oh, and if you haven't seen this, this is our when we award these, we always give out our micro grant checks. When I went to the Awesome Summit, I stood up and I talked about this is something we came up with because we were going to do the giant novelty checks. And I said, like, everybody does that. Isn't there anything else we can do? And someone said, how about tiny checks? Because it's a micro grant. And then I went to the Awesome Summit and I went, hey, oh, now I understand why people get giant novelty checks. Like, you have no idea what I'm holding. But they've been a lot of fun. This is sort of our unique way of awarding the money. Those aren't real. Actually, somebody did tell me that that's cashable, but we actually give them a actual real check to go with it. But the thing we always ask is, what can you do with $1,000? So I want to go back to that try idea. If you have these ideas in your head, you may have a $100,000 idea. You might have a $10 million idea. What $1,000 can do, which I think is great, and we've seen this with a lot of the projects we have that could go on to become bigger things, it allows you to try, allows you to prototype your idea, right? If you think of prototyping, sometimes it's making a model of something that you can show people that they go, wow, that's really cool. Like when you described it, it didn't sound cool. Now that I see it, I want to give you lots and lots of money. Or maybe you want to start a nonprofit, but you have no idea if you can make that work. What if you used $1,000 to just test the idea? Maybe a single event, or maybe some other way just to get some initial feedback and validation of your idea. And then some of the ideas are just, I want to try something crazy. Those are some of the most fun. When we discuss these, there's always somebody, we always get in that mode where we're like, yeah, this is really important, and this is a community that's not heard enough, and this is, there's not enough of this in Pittsburgh. And then there's always the one guy, I could actually show you, the one trustee who always says it, but is it awesome? And that's always the hard part. But I do think a lot of times we're just excited that people in Pittsburgh are trying these things, trying to do things that aren't their day job. Nina Barbudo, who spoke 2 months ago at Creative Mornings, was the first person Matt and I approached to try to convince her to become an awesome trustee. And which was cool because she runs Assemble down here in East Liberty or in Garfield on Penn Avenue. She originally was going to call it Awesome Gallery. And that's actually how we found her, because she was talking about Awesome Gallery. And we're like, okay, that sounds like somebody we should talk to. And then we found out all these things she does. She has like 19 side projects going on. I'm not sure which one of those is actually her day job. I think like 7 of them are. She ended up not calling it Awesome Gallery because it was right next to Awesome Books. So there's a lot of awesomeness in the city. But we liked that idea that she was just trying all these new things. She was trying. She did the I Made It Market, and she did Assemble, and she's just trying things, not knowing if they're going to succeed. And I see that more and more in Pittsburgh, which I think is incredible. And that's we think we can help with that, and we think other people are willing to help with that as well. And the great thing about $1,000 is it can grow, right? It can spark something bigger. Like we love that the Sprout Fund jumped on the Drift idea and helped them turn it into something much bigger. We had another one called Smiles for Hilltop, the Hilltop communities. There were 2 pediatricians there who said, we're getting kids that have serious dental problems, like infections. They're getting infections because they don't have dental care. Like they're not getting basic cleanings, and those are turning into something much worse. They're dental problems that become just health problems. And they said, what if and they don't have access to it, right? So she said, what if we got fluoride packets and handed them out to the patients as they came in for just like their well child checkups. She's hacking the health system. Like these doctors are they're not supposed to do this, right? This isn't standard health care practices to provide dental care at a well child visit. But they tried it out, $1 packets, and they were able to get 1,000 of them. They talked about it on the radio, and they got another donation from someone else, from another pediatrician who heard that and said, yes, here's more money. Please do that and let us know how it goes. And if this works, then we'll do it too. There's a pediatrician in Braddock who said, can you tell me about this and how I can get into this? So it's starting to spread. And that's one of the things we love is $1,000 has a limit to what you can buy, but it has no limit to what it can lead to. And it lets you take risks. I think one of the other things is people are afraid to try something because they don't know how it's going to turn out. They don't know who's going to try to stop them. And sometimes it's just easier not to try. So we want people to take more risks. And we want people to, you have these ideas and you're not sure if you want to do it. They've been in your head. I think this was something Nate said about First Bite Society. Something that's been bothering him for a long time is computer science is kept to a small group of people. And he wanted to break open that model. And when he heard about Awesome Pittsburgh, he's like, maybe this is what I need, is like that little push, that little thing that sparks it into happening. One of the things that I also like is there are people who put in ideas for proposals. They didn't get funded. They decided to go forward anyway with their idea. And they said, no, I'm glad you guys came along because I wasn't going to do it. And then I put the proposal together and I started to get excited about it. And then I ended up giving it a try and found other ways to get money. So we love that too. And like I said, we do try to bring attention to the people that are doing stuff like that. So just as an example of one that got really big, I like the drift one because I think it's $5,000 or $10,000 that it attracted. But in Boston there was a bigger one. There was a guy who, the story starts like this. This guy really likes balloons. He just always loved balloons, and he wanted to do a project with balloons. That was that was the extent of his idea. And he said, what if we attached cameras to balloons and used it to do sort of a grassroots mapping areas that are hard to get to. They're too inaccessible. You don't get the fine-grained detail from satellites, but they're too hard to get to on foot. So what if we use balloons? He got a $1,000 grant to try it out. Did some mapping around the MIT area with it. But then when the Gulf oil spill happened, the BP spill happened, actually it was later than that, but where there's ongoing environmental problems there, he started a Kickstarter project to get the funding to take these kits that he built with balloons and cameras and the harness down to the Gulf Coast and map out all the damage that had happened along the coast. And he raised like $8,000. But more importantly, he got a lot of press and attention for that. People were like, "Oh, I see what you're doing. You're reaching areas that we're not getting to right now, and you're able to turn that around faster than satellite imagery." Although Google's getting much better at that, so they may not last. So he got a grant from the Knight Foundation for $500,000 to open a lab in Boston. And the lab is still doing the same thing. They're still attaching cameras to kites and balloons and then taking them out around the country. But now there's a whole center devoted to this. And I'm assuming he quit his day job to work on that. So I don't think most projects will end up this way. And I don't think that's the idea. I think the idea is just try something that you've been thinking about. Try an idea. And Awesome Pittsburgh isn't the only way to do it, right? There's a lot of groups in Pittsburgh, more and more all the time. And somebody once said to me, like, aren't there just too many groups giving out money? I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I can tell you there's 39 proposals this month that all deserve money, and you should, until they're all funded, that's not going to be the case. I would tell you to go check some of these out. Soup and That's an awesome one. We've directed a lot of people that way, especially artists. It's a program that you go as an audience member. You spend $10 for soup. That money goes into a big pot, and then 5 different artists get up and pitch their idea, and all the money from the soup goes to that artist. And you vote. So you actually get to be the trustee. You get to be the one that votes for it. So we love that one. We send all of the art projects that way. Business Bout is a business competition, so we've sent people their direction for business ideas. Get Tip is very cool. It's the idea of Get Tip is inspiring generosity. It's the idea that even smaller amounts of money can start to add up. And if you're doing something that you otherwise would be doing for free, what if you were able to get gifts to thank you for doing it? And what if you're able to give gifts to thank other people for doing that? Chad Whitaker is actually here. He's the founder of Get Tip, so you should definitely talk to him about it because I think it's the next level, right? It's the next thing where everybody's participating in this funding great ideas or launching great ideas with that funding idea. And there's others, right? There's companies that are providing seed funds to startups. There's groups that are funding business plans all around the city. There's more and more of this, and it's getting to the point now where there's no reason not to try something. Time and energy and money are the 3 things that probably make it difficult. Maybe knowledge too, but even that's sort of falling away. Like, put out a call and say, does anybody know how to do this? Does anybody know how to program in Python? Or does anybody know how to hook a camera to a balloon? Put those messages out there, and Pittsburghers love to help. Like, it's amazing. It's amazing how much, if you ask for help, people in Pittsburgh want to help with no expectation of getting anything back. The greatest thing for me with Awesome Pittsburgh is meeting all these great people and just constantly finding people that want to help in some way. We had one of the unknown benefits I got, we celebrated our first birthday last week at Ava Lounge here in East Liberty, and it was packed wall to wall, which was really cool. And I got a lot of hugs from people I've never met. To me, that's sort of like the icing on top of the cake. Is like somebody saying, no, this was needed, this was a good thing, and these are people I never would have met at like the tech events where nobody hugs. Or if they do, it's in a really awkward way. So I would say that's sort of what I want to see happening is, everybody trying things, everybody pitching in to help the people that are trying things, taking down those barriers of knowledge and energy and time, and of course money. And we love being a part of the money solution to that, if not the others. This was our slogan, forwarding the interest of awesome in Pittsburgh, $1,000 at a time. I don't think I said clearly enough because it's really important. With the money that we give out, there's no strings attached. We'll never ask you. We'll ask you if you want help. We'll ask you if we can connect you with people. We'll ask you how things are going, not because we're expecting a report back on your progress, but because if you're stuck somewhere, we want to be able to help. But there's no strings attached. You never have to report back. Some projects didn't happen. They didn't happen, or they happened differently than we originally expected. Like Murphy's project to set up a photo booth in Market Square. And that's okay, right? The idea is to try things. So if this was about only succeeding, it wouldn't work as well. But because it's $1,000 to try things, we think it's a great way to do it. There's our information if you did that, but it's pretty easy to find. If you Google Awesome Pittsburgh, or Bing Awesome Pittsburgh, I should be fair, you'll find us pretty easily. So now go do something awesome. The end.